Neat. Okay, wonderful. So I think we're live. Namaskar, everybody, for all the listeners that are joining in. Once again, this is Let's Talk Kathak, and I'm here today with Sonal Kumar Turakhia, who's a phenomenal Kathak artist based out of Southern California. And we're here to just talk about Kathak.
For having me. Thank you so much.
Yeah. So we're just going to dive right in.
Yeah, let's do it. Let's do it. Let's talk.
Yeah. So I wanted to ask you, as I've been asking everybody, if you could just tell us a little bit about your beginnings in Kathak dance, what got you into the form, and what was your early training like?
Sure. I'd like to say that I was kind of born into it. My mother, as you may all know, Kumar, she started teaching when I was just 2 or 3 years old out of her garage, and I would just sit and watch. And just watch her teach. I would memorize all the bowls just because I loved it. And there was no pressure on her end. It was just my being there felt like home in the garage for hours just watching. And that interest never left. And it just became a part of who I am. And my formal training probably began when I was 5 or 6 years old. But ever since I could remember, I would be outside on the swing, just reciting the bowls, dancing, mimicking what she was teaching. And even my first stage show when I was when I was 2.5, almost 3 years old. And yeah, it's what I've been doing. I feel like my entire life, and I credit that to just my mom, Poonam Kumar.
Yeah. And what was your, at some point in time, you probably started formally training.
Mm-hmm.
And what was that training like?
Yeah, I'd say in elementary school, I started formally training with just the groups of students and um, getting to know the intricacies of whether it's the footwork and the bowls and the hands and the proper posture. And um, I always felt like I already had an in. Clearly, because I started, I had a mom there. And so I being in a group setting, being with my peers just kind of helped form that path. And I've not looked back ever since. And I think I've preferred performing and doing things as a group, I think, because of that, because there was this peer-to-peer dynamic and we became friends, and it was a friendship beyond just a class and learning. And I think there's more to that than there is just there's a community aspect to it than just formally learning something.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm so happy you spoke about that, because I have a similar experience
Mm-hmm.
with the bonds that I have with my dance sisters are really deep. They're
Mm-hmm.
profound, and they translate, off the stage, and it's a sisterhood. It's a kind of a
Absolutely.
sisterhood, and I see that in my students as
Mm-hmm.
well.
Mm-hmm.
And what was your training? Kathak has a lot of technique. It also has a lot of musicality, and every teacher is kind of different.
Mm-hmm.
Was your training very rigorous and strict? Was it a little bit more open? Just what actually like learning the form was like with your friends and community.
Um, I feel like the times are a lot different in the 80s, early 80s. There was It's hard to say whether it was strict or more open, but yes, it was rigorous. Although it was just once a week, right? When my mom was learning, it was every day back in India. This was just once a week. And so whatever you could pack into that weekly 1 hour class, it was go, go, go. And I feel like early on, while it was a lot of fun, you have to learn the technique and the basics at some point, and that started very early on in our classes. And so I would say there was a strict component to it, because you have to be disciplined to learn any classical form.
Mhm.
This isn't just fun and games. You have to learn all the angles and everything, and so there is a strict component to it. But doing it together in that community, in that sisterhood, made it fun. And um, we learned very early on, there was tradition, there was things that you did. You always say namaskar, you're respecting the earth, you're respecting your guru, you're always saying hello, and you're going to respect your gurus, because they are the ones teaching you. These are these little things that you learned that you didn't really realize were such a
Mhm.
big part of what the classical arts and what we are as people today.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah. And then, there must have been a moment where you decided, okay, I don't want to just study and take classes,
Mhm.
but I want to be a part of advancing the form
Mhm.
in this world as an
Mhm.
artist, as a
Mhm.
dancer. And tell us a little bit about that decision. What inspired you to kind of really take that on and step into the role of, artist and advocate and performer?
Mhm. I always thought Kathak was so cool, right? Ever since I was, watching, I thought it was so cool. And um, before I even knew what that word meant. And my whole thing has been, since the very beginning, is I can't let it go. I've learned so much. I think it's cool. I think you should think it's cool too. And this is how I'm going to do it. And um, it's always been, I can't let it go. I can't let it go. There's so much to offer with this form. And um, when I listen to pieces of music, I'm inspired. And I think that's what's kind of helped me keep. And also, we've had students that have been with the school for, 20, 30 plus years. And to take those students who have become like my sisters, and to be able to share that vision of not being able to let it go, and to see how far you can take it, and just um, see it flourish in a different way, in a different time, in a different era, is, I feel, um, kind of like my calling.
Mm.
And it's like I said, it's very simple. I can't let it go, and I need to see where I can take it. I need to see where I can take it. Yeah.
That's I understand that simplicity. And tell us a little bit about your work with the company. You've made a decision to kind of have a company, and you must have a artistic approach and vision for the company. What kinds of projects do you do? What kinds of performances do you like to do?
um I think I'm just going to backtrack just a little bit in terms of the classical arts. um I feel like it's a dying art form, right? And I feel like we, as classical artists, whether it's music or dance, we have to adapt to the time, to make it relevant and to make it accessible. And um, what keeps me going and what inspires me is to listen. When I listen to music, or I watch other artists doing things that they love, that I draw from that. And so, for example, one of our most popular pieces is the soundtrack to the HBO Succession. I was watching the show, and usually we have a tendency to skip over that title track and just to get to the show. But I couldn't. I had to listen to the title track, and I would be in tears every time I listened to it. And this was what, mid 2019, right before the pandemic hit. Um, and I turned to my husband and I said, I got to do a dance to this. I got to do something to this. And I think it kind of started from there. And we created the video and all that stuff. Let's fast forward a little bit. I think the pandemic really put things into perspective. I think that's where I started fast forwarding. That's where I started, like, the motivation started coming from, hey, we can't perform live anymore. We're just going to have to switch gears a little bit here. And
Mhm.
up until this time, it's been Kathak performances, live performances, doing taranas and this and that. And this may give me an opportunity now to do something, since I can't go anywhere, to do something that I've been wanting to do. And I think it was almost a blessing in disguise. And people kind of connect to videos and the internet, and that was the route we ended up taking. And so, like, the Succession was our first video, and we made a few videos after that. And I'm not quite sure if this is answering your question, but I was finally giving myself the opportunity to pursue music and musical pieces that were just stuck in my brain, and there was no way out. We had to do something with it. So,
Yeah.
we did Coldplay. We've also done some Indian music, and so I feel like it art is what you make of it. And if there's music or if there are pieces that inspire you, you just go for it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. No. And tell us how you kind of navigate, because there's the realm of traditional Kathak,
Mm-hmm.
and there's when you step out of that, right? Whether it's stepping out of that with music that's not traditional Indian music, like you said, um, or even collaborating with art forms that aren't, Kathak or Indian even.
Mm-hmm.
So tell us how you kind of navigate tradition and experimentation and um, fusion or collaboration, however you like to characterize it.
Sure, that's a really good question. I think we should define what tradition is, right? Like, Kathak originally started um, in the temples, right? It was a religion. There was a religious aspect to it, and then when we had the Mughal emperors present years later, it turned into a court dance, right? And so it's adapted according to the stories that are being told at that time, right? And where the interest may lie.
Mhm.
So I think we have to adapt our traditions to what fits the stories today. And so, with that being said, um, I'm sorry, what was the second part of your question again?
How you navigate moving
Mm, mm, yeah,
with
yeah,
tradition,
yeah.
and with other forms.
Yeah.
Is it natural for you? Is it organic? It doesn't seem like it's a, problem, or do you have to,
Mm.
do you have a particular way that you approach moving outside of your tradition?
For me, personally, it's organic and it's natural,
Yeah.
but I am hit with a little bit of resistance
Mhm.
um, from those that are more traditional.
Mhm.
And in my eyes, I'm not doing anything wrong. I'm just here to create art. And it takes a little bit of pushing. It takes a little bit of cracking. And I think at the end, as long as I'm confident with what I've done, and I have taken the traditional elements, however you want to define
Mhm.
traditional, what I've learned, the footwork and the hand movements, and I've applied it to music that I can relate to. And so my goal is to do both,
Mhm.
right? Keep the traditional elements, but make it relevant to what I think it is. And yes, there has been resistance, but you keep pushing. You just keep pushing, and some people may like it, and some people may not like it, and that's okay. And I think that's one of the trials and tribulations of being an artist, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So, and I think it was also working. We've done a few pieces with a flamenco dancer, Clarita, and that was a gift that was given to us, many years ago. I'd say about 10 years ago. um, Someone had approached us to do a piece together for a professor at LMU, Loyola Marymount University, and so we were just brought together, create a piece, just do something. And that's where our relationship started. And there's a history with Kathak and flamenco. They're related.
Mhm.
um, they're related. And so when you look at the footwork of the flamenco and the footwork of the Kathak and some of the forms, there is there's a beautiful relationship to that.
Mhm.
And that has made me think, hey, what if we did something with an Irish dance form, or with something? There's something to be said. Music is so music and dance kind of transcend those boundaries of the
Absolutely.
world, right?
Yep.
So
Yep.
let's work together and see what new art we can create since the world has gotten smaller.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I'm listening to your answers and relating quite a bit because we also do a lot of traditional work at Leela Dance Collective, and then we do a lot of collaborative work. Uh,
Mhm,
and the process is organic. It is
mhm,
really organic. And I think part of the reason it is for us is our grounding in the tradition is really solid.
mhm,
Uh,
mhm.
so when your grounding in the tradition is very solid, there's just really solid foundation there for you to be able to like experiment. You know when you're moving out of the form, you know when you're within the form,
Yeah, yeah,
and you have a instinct around what works and what doesn't.
absolutely. Yes,
Yeah,
yes, yes, yes.
I'm happy you spoke to that.
Yeah, and I like how you said that we're grounded in our work. We're grounded. We have learned the ABCs.
Yeah.
We are grounded that. I think, and I don't know if this is going off on a tangent a little bit. I think a lot of times we see people that are artists that haven't learned the ABCs, that
Mhm.
that are trying to create something a little bit more different. But as classical artists, we do have to hold true the traditional elements. We have to honor that. We
Mhm.
have to definitely honor that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Well, the other question that I had for you is, there's not just collaboration and experimentation outside, but there's also kind of, Kathak has moved into Bollywood very many
Mhm,
years ago. And,
mhm,
there's very traditional Kathak, and then there's more popular Bollywoodized
mhm,
uh,
mhm,
Kathak.
mhm,
And, every artist and every teacher navigates that um, kind of line
mhm,
very differently. Some folks feel like, I really want to be very clearly in the traditional realm. And some folks feel that there's a real opportunity around um, moving into and working within the realm of Bollywood. And so I just wanted to ask you, for you, how do you navigate that?
I think it all depends on the what the personal goal is for the artist,
Mhm.
right? If your goal is to advance Kathak, then we have to take a certain path, right? If your goal is to advance in the Bollywood world, which is so beautiful and vibrant,
Mhm.
then you take the skills that you've learned and you go that route. And so I don't judge either way, but it all is, I think it's what you personally want to do with it. And for me personally, um, I do feel like there is such a demand for Bollywood because I feel like that's what a lot of the world outside of India knows. That's all they know in terms of Indian dance is Bollywood. And there's so much more to Indian dance outside of Bollywood. I mean, you take the genre of Bollywood, which is a combination of different classical dances. That is the genre of Bollywood. Um, and when we're getting offers for gigs and whatnot, there's check boxes that we can check off, like what kind of dance are we like? And the only Indian dance that we are offered is Bollywood. Like, I guess we're a Bollywood group, but are we really a Bollywood group? And so I try to shy away from that because I feel like, for me personally, I want to advance Kathak and however that art takes me. I personally do not want to advance Bollywood because I am a Kathak dancer and I'm a classical dancer. And again, this is not to knock anyone that is going that route, um, but there's just so much more to offer, um, besides just Bollywood. And I want the world to see that. I want the community here to see that outside of the South Asian community. There's so much more to it. And I do credit artists like Madhuri Dixit, right? And she's a trained classical Kathak dancer she's brought light to Kathak, I think. Um, and so I do credit, we get students all the time saying, "Hey, I want to dance like Madhuri Dixit or Ashwarya Rai." I'm like, "Well, she's a trained Kathak dancer, so yes, you've come to the right." You need a hook. Students nowadays they don't know. They
Yeah.
don't know. You need a hook. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, no, and I appreciate that. I agree that there's so much more. And because of how popular Bollywood is, sometimes that can become the only representation of Indian culture,
Mm-hmm.
Indian art. And I think, yeah, I think I definitely understand what you mean when you say we want the world to see all the rest of what else there is, in terms of Indian dance and music.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and then the one question I also wanted to ask is, there are, we're not doing Indian dance for only Indian people. We're doing Indian dance for a very, very diverse audience, and in many ways, we are translating tradition, to audiences outside of our community and our culture. And kind of how do you navigate and see your role as a translator? Like what kinds of things have come up when you're performing for non-Indian audiences? How do you do that work?
That's a tough one.
Yeah.
I think when you start putting things into boxes, I think you're limiting yourself.
Mhm.
And so when someone approaches us and says, "Oh, we want you to do a Bollywood piece, or we want you to do a Kathak piece, or we want you to do a," um, I tend to just not listen and just give them what we think would be best at that point, right? And so I think a lot of audiences don't really know what Kathak is. They don't know the difference between Kathak or Bollywood or this or that. And we will just present what we think is best. And sometimes it's difficult because you don't know what the audience is going to like. And that's a different conversation altogether. But you can advertise yourself a certain way, but at the end of the day, it's up to you what you're going to present to the audience. And it's difficult because I wish we could offer ourselves as we're Kathak dancers, like ballet, right? It's so known worldwide, and different countries have done different things to adapt and to make it into their own. And I wish for Kathak and all other classical dances that they're able to do that. That let's take it out of India and put it on a worldwide stage as art.
Mhm.
And if people ask what it is, you say, "Hey, that's Kathak."
Mhm.
That's right. Like work backwards, maybe. Like it
Yeah.
doesn't have to be Kathak. This is what we dance. This is what we do. What is that? It's Kathak, and
Yeah.
this is where it comes from.
That's a great approach. Yeah,
Yeah.
lovely approach. I think moving now into kind of talking a little bit about the traditional aspects of the form, there traditionally the art form is performed with music, live music. And nowadays you don't see that as much anymore. Sometimes it's a budget reason, sometimes it's a logistics reason, sometimes there aren't musicians that are available. Um, and so, another traditional aspect of the form is improvisation, right? Upaj. And
Mhm.
that's also being lost
Mhm.
as we go for performances that are like produced for the main stage, and even performances for video. So,
Mhm.
how do you try to work with maintaining spaces and places where you can work with live music and do upaj? How do you navigate kind of leaving behind or not having the opportunity to work with those traditional elements all the time?
Yeah, that's that's a great question. So it is. I talked to mom about this quite a bit, and she was in training 5 days, 6 days a week, and there was always a tabla player, and there was always live musicians, and that's how she learned. That's how she trained. Um, that was that time. There was a space for the classical arts to some extent, and that was the classical artists. They were able to maintain. That was their bread and butter, and they were able to maintain. Right. Nowadays, we don't have that luxury. Um, Yes, it is a budget issue. Yes, it is a time issue. We don't train 5, 6 days a week. But when we do get to work with the live orchestra, live musician, with the tabla player, it is such a treat. But we haven't been taught. We haven't been taught to train with the tabla player. And so oftentimes I was lucky enough where I got to do many hours of one-on-one training with the
Mhm.
tabla player. And you have to, as an artist, as an individual artist versus a group dynamic, you have to be able to feel feed off the energy of the
Mhm.
musician. And when you're working with a group, which is what the norm is now, it's hard to do that. You cannot feed off the energy because you're working in a group, and there hasn't been much experience within a 1 hour class once a week. And so I do feel sad that those opportunities aren't there. And that is such a big part of the classical of Kathak. But again, you have to kind of keep up with the time. If performing with the live orchestra, I'm noticing doesn't translate as dynamically as it did 20, 30 years ago, right? You could feel the energy of the audience. They could feel the energy between the dancer and the orchestra. I don't feel like the audiences today, and I could be wrong, would understand that dynamic. And so let's just keep moving with live music. I mean, with recorded music, which is so beautiful. But God, it's such a complicated question. It is very complicated. I think there is nothing like working with a live orchestra, but given the circumstances, you kind of have to make do with
Mhm.
live or with recorded. And I wish there was more opportunities for the audiences to really understand the mastery of working with a blood player, and where you're just doing things improvised, right? Where there hasn't been no rehearsal. I'm like, hey, you do this footwork, and I'm gonna jabab saval, and that there's so much fun to be had with that. But I don't think it would translate,
Yeah.
to be honest with you.
Yeah, no, that's it's an interesting, I agree it's a complicated question. And you know, when we do our work, there's the joy, the beauty of like 4 or 5 dancers dancing in, completely synchronized in choreography.
Mhm,
And improvisation is a lot more raw,
mhm,
and it's unproduced, and oftentimes it's one musician and one dancer, and so
mhm,
it's a very the form is very different, and new to people who are watching. It's unfamiliar, I guess.
mhm, mhm,
And it's interesting because I've seen it go both ways. I've seen it received really well,
mhm.
and then I've also seen it received with just a lack of understanding, I would say.
Yeah,
A lack
absolutely.
of
Yeah.
understanding what people are watching and what people
Mhm.
exactly are. It's just unfamiliar and new.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. When mom has put on so many productions, and there were many live pieces, and just the coordinating of the group, 5 or 6 dancers, different groups. So that's, I don't know, 20, 30 dancers with the musicians. It's a logistical nightmare. And so when you're doing a live piece, we've done it and it turns out beautifully, but
Yeah,
it is very difficult to do. And I feel like people's schedules are getting busier and busier
yeah, it's
every
hard.
day. It
Yeah,
is hard. Yeah,
yeah, and not there aren't tons and tons of musicians that know how to work with Kathak. Also, that's
absolutely.
also,
Yeah,
you
yeah.
know, it's a specialized kind of skill, I think.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Um, I want to ask a little bit about the. I put on my glasses because I'm referring to my notes.
Sure.
Um, Kathak has a really explicit kind of spiritual component.
Mm-hmm.
um, and that's hard to teach. And some people take the art form as just dance and just entertainment, and then others take it deeper.
Mm-hmm.
I'm curious if you could talk to that element of Kathak dance a little bit, the kind of um, not so much the ritualized, but the real spiritual aspect, the aspect around being able to connect to something greater than ourselves through the dance.
Mm-hmm. That is very hard to teach.
Mm-hmm.
You can just tell, and I'm sure you can too. The students that feel the music
Mm-hmm.
versus students that are just performing to the music.
Mm-hmm.
There's a different energy that the students that are feeling the music that just give up. Their body posture is moving to the music. The way they're looking, they're in that meditative state when they're performing. And I don't feel like that's something you can teach. Once a dancer starts feeling their relation to the music is where I think the spirituality starts.
Yeah.
Otherwise, they're just there for, I'm learning a piece, I'm learning how to dance, and let's see what happens. I think you're either, I don't want to say you're either born with it or not. That's not what I'm trying to say. But I think not everyone feels the music as
Mm-hmm.
deeply or the piece as deeply. They're not as connected to it as
Mm-hmm.
others are. And yeah.
Yeah, I think some people just come to the form with that kind of opening and that kind of desire and intention.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
You know?
mm-hmm.
And I guess then after that, it's a personal journey for
Yes.
each
Mm-hmm.
dancer and each student um, around the transcendent aspect of the
Yeah.
form.
Mm-hmm.
I like that you're saying that you have to feel the music, because I do think we do Kathak dance, but it's really not just dance. It's
Mm-hmm.
also music, and the music um, and dance go hand in hand. And for me also, I think as a dancer, the music is very it's what allows me to drop into my heart,
Yes.
and really make it a heart mind body connection experience
Mm-hmm.
in terms.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so I definitely understand. I want to move to talking a little bit about the kind of infrastructure and support for Kathak dance, or lack thereof. um, as you know, one of my passions is figuring out how to provide support, financial support specifically. But the infrastructure, really the infrastructure that artists and the art form needs to thrive. And I'm just curious, first of all, what has your experience been? Like, is there support for the art form? Is there not? What are the challenges? And what do you think, like, what's on your wish list in terms of support that could come?
Oh, the struggle is real, and I'm glad you're touching on it. And I don't have. I wish I had answers, but I'm going to do my best with this one. Like I think I mentioned this earlier, where I feel like you have to go backwards sometimes. You kind of have to sell the art before you're selling the actual what it is, right? Oh,
Mhm.
I'm not. I've learned that if you say I'm going to do a Kathak piece, you may or may not get a reaction out of that. If I present something and then people ask what that is, that's what I feel like working backwards sometimes has worked to my benefit, where this is Kathak. And I don't think I've done a very good job in terms of creating infrastructure. I'm just my goal has been, again, like I said, just to see how far I can take Kathak. People like, I think you're doing a great job of trying to establish structure and infrastructure and getting funding. And I'd like to take it back to you, actually, like what has your experience been? Because I'm always at a loss. Like, what's the right way to go about doing this? And what's the goal? Is it a personal thing, or am I trying to popularize this? Do I need to popularize this? Who is it really for? And unless you're getting buy-in from people with the money, like it's hard to continue this, right?
Yeah, no, and I think for me, I wanted to be a dancer and an artist.
Mm-hmm.
And when I started to look around to see how I could do that, I started to realize that there's just there's no way. There's no Kathak dance company that I could go get a job with. There's just not there's literally not any infrastructure there. It's not like 20 Kathak dance companies that all are massively supported through donors and grants and stuff. And so for me, it became just, wait a second, like, why is it like this? I think I felt like the art form is so amazing and deserves to be out there in the world. And yet there's no support for it. And it ends up depending on a handful of artists that kind of take it on as a passion project. And so many artists have to work full-time jobs side by side. And the ones that are able to do this full-time often have support from families, partners or families that are supporting them financially. So I think I've just started to try to figure out like how you can get grants, and how you can sustain student income. And the struggle is real.
Yeah.
Because you spend a lot of time surviving, and making ends meet. And you don't end up having a lot of time to create art. And you have to, we all want to be kind of that I can do it, that individual, independent warrior going against all odds. And I certainly have done that. But you hit a limit, and you really need support. The form needs support. The artist needs support.
The artist needs support.
And we're trying, in small ways and big ways to do that. So it's one of my favorite things about this conversation series actually has been talking to other artists about, commiserating about just the fact that, the struggle is really real.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm fortunate. I'm very fortunate that mom is teaching. She's been teaching for close to 40 years now, 35, 40 years. And she's running the school and she's getting those students going. And I'm so grateful and so lucky I'm in a position where I can take the dancers that have been with her for, 10, 15, 20 years and create. And if I were teaching, I think I would lose that opportunity to create because I've got kids and blah, 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 family and all that sort of stuff. And so I am so grateful that it's not lost on me that I am in a very fortunate spot there and that I am able to create. But there still isn't, I look at the artists that are in the dance company, what is their return on investment? They're putting in their time and their energy and then oftentimes money. And there's only so much that I can offer because there just isn't enough support and funding for the art that we put out there.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It has to be, it has to be a passion and a love. And, we romanticize that a lot of times in the community, but I think it's important to move beyond to be like, well, we really have to think about the support piece. And then, I'm just watching the time and we're kind of coming slowly to the end of this conversation. And I have been wanting to just ask, or enjoying asking all of my guests, if there's a topic or something that I didn't touch upon that you'd, like to share with our listeners. I think it's rare that we have these opportunities to hear each other and talk to each other. So anything else you'd like to share about your journey in the form or the form?
don't know if you've found this, and I think all artists can relate. Um, it is hard to keep going when it is just hard to keep going sometimes, right? Whether you're going through something super personal, um, whether you're just being met with resistance, whether you're not getting the funding, whether you're not, your reels aren't going viral as you think they might, or and just the constant maintenance you have to do with Instagram and all that sort of stuff. I feel like there's a lot that's working against um, creating. And I know for me personally, when I'm in a space where I can't, I just don't. And how do you navigate that?
Gosh, I think breaks are important. I mean, I feel like I'm a pretty willful person, and so I feel like in a lot of ways I can get myself to, like, just by sheer willpower or discipline, do things. But as you know, art making doesn't come from willpower, and it doesn't come from discipline. It comes from a different place, and so more and more, and especially after the pandemic, because I do think things have gotten harder for performing artists. I
Yeah.
mean, after the pandemic, and especially if you're doing a form like Kathak,
Mm-hmm.
there aren't as many grants, there aren't as many funders that are open.
Mm-hmm.
The economy is changing all around us, and so I feel like more and more, I feel like creativity has its own timeline.
Yeah.
And we have to honor the timeline of creativity. We have to, there are times when things come out of me fast, like when I'm working with my dance sisters, Rechna and Sabi, when we're choreographing, things come, sometimes we've been able to, like, create a production in a week, which sounds insane. And then sometimes just nothing is coming and nothing is coming.
Yeah.
And so I feel like I've just learned to honor that timeline. And we're not machines. Human beings are not machines. Sometimes we get distracted by other responsibilities, or stressed out by financial stress, or the stress of running the school. So I think, it just that, and continuing to try to keep space open for creativity,
Mm-hmm.
because it's really easy for, responsibilities and everything else to encroach kind of onto that, like, sacred space where creativity happens.
Sacred space. I like that.
Yeah. And, I do just want to touch on the fact that I do think it's beautiful that you have the partnership with your mom. Because not everybody does. And when you have a partnership like that, where, someone can teach and someone can create,
Mm-hmm.
it's amazing.
Mm-hmm.
I have to do both.
Yeah.
And I was talking to Smita about how it's pretty impossible to do both. And I certainly feel like teaching has compromised my ability to, perform. And then when I am doing a good performance run, I feel like I'm not paying attention to the teaching responsibility.
That balance is tough.
It's tough. And yeah, it's pretty tough. So yeah, I think it's beautiful that you have, that partnership. And we, your mom is one of the earliest artists here in Southern California, to establish a school here. How many years has she been teaching and working now?
Oh gosh, 1983.
Yeah.
That's when the school was established. She started teaching a little bit before that, maybe 1982 or so.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So she's, my Guruji established his institution in 1980.
Okay.
So,
Around the same time. Yeah.
yeah, around kind of the same time. Yeah. Lovely. Is there anything else that you want to share with our audience members, or, any other topic before we close out this incredible conversation?
I'm just glad that you're doing this, and it's inspiring what you're doing, and I thank you for bringing me on,
Yeah.
honestly.
Yeah,
Yeah.
no, we're so happy to have you, and um, I'm really hopeful that we've invited all the artists in Southern California, and
Mhm.
a lot of the other artists have spoken to just wow, like we know each one of us is um, having similar journeys and similar struggles in our own kind of isolated bubbles, but it's really nice to kind of come together and talk to each other and start to, I think, build community here.
Yeah, and I think that was lacking. I think it's a different kind of collaborative community that we're now creating, and you're doing such a beautiful job of doing. Whereas I think before it might have been a little bit more competitive,
Yeah,
and I think it's great because it's better to just work together than against each other.
yeah, absolutely. No, it's. I think there's a shift happening, definitely,
Yes, absolutely.
where I think people are really wanting connection, really wanting community, and um, I think operating from a place of possibility and,
Yeah,
and abundance,
abundance.
that there's, enough audience members, enough, applause and enough funding for all of us. I mean, there isn't, but there is kind of a thing.
Yeah, right. Yeah, we're all working for the same cause, and we're rooting each other on, right? Yeah,
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 absolutely. Well, it's been lovely. It's been really, really lovely to have you
yes.
on. Thank you so much for
Thank
being willing
you.
to share your
Sure.
experiences and your story. And everybody else, please stay tuned. We have 3 more of these coming. Excited for the next few guests, and we'll talk with you soon.
All right. Thank you so much. Thanks.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.